What if a philosopher who never farmed a single day in his life invented the most controversial agricultural system on Earth? And what if, 100 years later, science is starting to prove the core of his vision right? This is the story of biodynamic farming, the world's oldest organized organic agriculture movement, and it begins in a small village that is today part of Croatia. Rudolf Steiner was born on the 27th of February, 1861, in Muracurali, now known as Donji Kraljevic, a village in the Međimurje region of Croatia. At the time, this was part of the Kingdom of Hungary within the Austrian Empire. His father was a telegraph operator on the Southern Austrian Railway, and the family moved twice in the first 2 years of Rudolf's life, eventually settling near Vienna. But it was in this Croatian village, on the border between Central Europe and the Balkans, that one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century first drew breath. Steiner became a philosopher, an educator, and the founder of what he called anthroposophy, a spiritual philosophy that sought to bridge the material and the spiritual worlds. He built schools, hospitals, and communities across Europe. He wrote books on education, medicine, architecture, and agriculture. He traveled extensively, giving lectures to audiences that included scientists, artists, doctors, and farmers. But he never studied farming. He never owned a farm. And yet, in 1924, he delivered 8 lectures that would launch the first organized organic farming movement in human history. The context matters. After World War I, European agriculture was in crisis. Chemical fertilizers, which had been developed during the war, alongside explosives manufacturing, were being repurposed for food production. Farmers across Germany and Central Europe were watching their soil deteriorate. Crop yields were declining. Livestock health was deteriorating. And nobody could explain why. The farmers who invited Steiner to speak were desperate. They had noticed a pattern. The more chemicals they used, the more dependent they became on those same chemicals. It was a trap, and they knew it. In the summer of 1924, 111 people gathered at Schloss Koberwitz, an estate near the town of Breslau, now Wrocław, for a series of lectures that would last 10 days. They came from 6 countries, mostly Germany and Poland. Fewer than half were farmers. The rest were doctors, scientists, and educators who had heard about Steiner's broader philosophical work. What they heard over those 10 days was unlike anything they had expected. These lectures, published later that year and translated into English in 1928 as the agriculture course, became the foundation of everything we now call biodynamic farming. It was the very first organized organic agriculture movement in the world, predating the wider organic movement by decades. Steiner's core argument was radical and remains controversial. He said that soil, plants, animals, and cosmic rhythms were not separate things to be managed independently, but one interconnected system. A farm, in his view, was not a factory. It was a living organism, and the health of that organism depended on closing the loops, keeping nutrients cycling between fields, compost, animals, and atmosphere, rather than importing synthetic inputs from outside. At the center of this vision are 9 numbered preparations, known simply as 500 through 508. These are not fertilizers in the conventional sense. They are concentrated, highly specific preparations made from natural materials, applied in tiny amounts, and designed to stimulate biological activity in the soil and compost. Preparation 500 is the most famous and most controversial. It is made by stuffing cow manure into a cow horn and burying the horn 40 to 60 centimeters underground in autumn. Over the winter, the manure transforms through a process that Steiner described as a kind of slow fermentation driven by the cold and the darkness. In spring, the horn is dug up. The transformed humus is then stirred vigorously into water for about an hour to create a vortex, and the resulting liquid is sprayed across the fields in fine droplets. The cow horn is central to this. Steiner believed that the horn shape, with its spiral interior, concentrates and transforms the biological processes inside the manure. Modern biodynamic farmers strictly use real cow horns for this process, as required by Demeter standards. The amount used is tiny. A single horn of preparation 500 is sufficient to treat an entire farm of several hectares. Preparation 501 follows a different seasonal logic. Crushed powdered quartz, or silica, is packed into a cow horn, buried in spring, and dug up in autumn. It is then sprayed on crops as a fine mist, meant to help plants process sunlight and strengthen their natural defenses. Where Preparation 500 is about the soil, Preparation 501 is about the plant itself. Biodynamic farmers spray 500 on cloudy days or late afternoons, and 501 in the early morning sun. The remaining 7 preparations, numbered 502 through 508, are compost preparations. Each uses a specific herb combined with a specific natural element. Preparation 502 uses yarrow blossoms placed inside the urinary bladder of a red deer. 503 puts chamomile flowers into the small intestines of cattle. 504 embeds stinging nettle plants deep in the soil. 505 stuffs oak bark into the skull of a domestic animal. 506 places dandelion flowers in the mesentery of a cow. 507 uses valerian flower extract. 508 uses a decoction of horsetail. Each of these preparations follows a precise seasonal rhythm for when it is buried, when it is dug up, and when it is applied to the compost heap. The underlying idea is that the plant material, transformed inside the animal sheath and influenced by the seasons, helps the compost decompose in a balanced, structured way. A handful of these preparations, added to a compost heap of several tons, is meant to vitalize the entire decomposition process. Now, here is where one of the most important figures in biodynamic history enters the story. Maria Thun. Born in 1922 in Germany, Thun dedicated 60 years of her life to researching how cosmic rhythms and planetary cycles influence plant growth. Working from her farm in Germany, Thun conducted systematic sowing trials, planting crops on different days and measuring the results over decades. Her central framework was based on the sidereal position of the moon, which is its position in front of the actual constellations of the zodiac, rather than the standard tropical calendar. Thun identified 4 categories of days, each corresponding to one of the 4 classical elements, and 3 zodiac signs. Root days fall when the moon passes through earth signs like Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn. Leaf days occur during water signs like Pisces, Cancer, or Scorpio. Flower days happen under air signs like Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius. And fruit and seed days take place when the moon is in fire signs like Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius. Through decades of meticulous documentation, Thun recorded patterns that shaped modern biodynamic practice. Onions harvested on root days showed better storage stability, while fruiting plants like tomatoes responded best when worked on fire days. While mainstream science still debates the astronomical mechanisms behind these lunar effects, for generations of biodynamic growers, Thun's calendar became an indispensable guide for everyday farm work. The Maria Thun Biodynamic Calendar is now published annually in 18 languages. Thun's calendar became an indispensable guide for everyday farm work. It remains the primary tool that biodynamic gardeners and farmers use worldwide to time their planting, cultivating, and harvesting. The Demeter certification was established in 1928, making it the first organic certification label in history. Named after the Greek goddess of harvest, it remains the gold standard for biodynamic farming worldwide. Today, Demeter-certified farms operate in over 50 countries, from France and Germany to Egypt, India, and the United States. The standards are strict. A farm must operate as a holistic ecosystem, strictly banning synthetic chemicals, ensuring high animal welfare, and integrating specific composting and soil practices. Critics of biodynamics often point to the cosmic and esoteric preparations as unscientific. And it is true that modern science does not attribute soil transformation to planetary forces. However, what has been proven beyond doubt is the ecological power of the system as a whole. One of the most important long-term studies in agricultural history is the DOK experiment, run by the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture, (FIBL), in Switzerland since 1978. The trial compares biodynamic, bioorganic, and conventional systems side by side on the exact same soil. A landmark paper published in the journal Science in 2002 by Paul Mader and his team analyzed decades of DOK data. The results confirmed that organic and biodynamic systems preserved significantly higher soil biodiversity, richer microbial life, and better soil structure, while using up to 50% less energy and zero synthetic pesticides compared to conventional farming. The land did not merely produce food, it stayed alive. What is often overlooked is that Steiner himself emphasized experimentation above all else. He presented his lectures as hypotheses to be tested, urging farmers to observe nature, experiment with methods, and adapt to their local environment. Today, as modern agriculture faces the massive challenges of topsoil erosion, climate change, and chemical resistance, the world is circling back to these ideas. The rapidly growing regenerative agriculture movement builds upon the very principles that biodynamics pioneered a century ago. Focusing on soil regeneration, biodynamics pioneered a century ago. If you are a gardener or a grower who wants to explore these planting rhythms in your own garden, there is now an app that makes the biodynamic calendar accessible and easy to follow. It is called Biocosmic, and it is available on the Google Play Store. The link is in the description below. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe to support more content on sustainable and regenerative farming. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.